I am also a proud board member and president of the Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. Before we begin, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge that anytime we're talking about housing, we're also talking about land. And so while we might be virtual this year, the land that we occupy is Indigenous land, and I am speaking to you from what we now call New Orleans, but was once known as Bulvancha, a place of many tongues, and also home to tribes such as the Chitimacha, the Atakapa, the Poma, the Ishak, and the Choctaw tribes, among the many others whose names are and languages we no longer know. Further, we have to acknowledge that Black people were stolen from their homelands, enslaved, and forced to work this stolen land for the benefit of colonizers and enslavers. As we talk today about displacement and discrimination and resistance in Louisiana and beyond, we really hope to honor this history and the ongoing connected struggle against colonization of this land and for liberation. This is especially important in this political moment, both globally and locally, that we never lose sight of why this work is so critical now and crucial for a brighter future. Now, it is my absolute honor, privilege, and joy to introduce my dear friend and Ffak's new executive director, Amika Reale, to make some opening remarks. Ms. Reale has more than 10 years of experience creating sustainable and thriving communities in Louisiana. She co-founded and led the Justice and Accountability Center, which built a mobile expungement clinic model that helped thousands of Louisianans to address the collateral consequences of arrest and conviction. She served as the New Orleans Program Officer and Director of Economic Justice at the Foundation for Louisiana, where she oversaw statewide grants to support programs and coalitions with a focus on public health and housing and justice and culture. Most recently, she was the membership director at Law for Black Lives, where she spearheaded the development of programs and a support network for more than 7,000 lawyers and legal workers who are committed to using the law and the power of organizing to defend, protect, and advance Black liberation across the globe. Ms. Reale, or as Amika as I call her, is well known for her commitment to social and racial justice, her firsthand and professional experience fighting for housing justice, and her deep roots in the New Orleans community. I am very excited to see how Amika's leadership will further Ffak's impactful and necessary work, and I am in deep admiration of her all the time. And with that, I am going to turn things over to Amika.
Thank you, Sarah. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to the Fit for a King Housing Summit. This is the fourth year I think we've hosted this summit virtually, and we decided to make the 2024 summit virtual after reviewing limited data that we have on respiratory disease transmission, including COVID-19. We want to thank our audience, speakers, and panelists for their flexibility in moving this event online. We chose this year's theme as the South goes, so goes the nation, to recognize the challenges we face in Louisiana and across the southern United States. Like many neighboring states, Louisiana has seen a rapid shift in the political landscape towards the extreme right. That's resulted in targeted attacks on efforts to eliminate racial discrimination and to expand opportunities for the most marginalized members in our community. As elected leaders enact policies that tear away at the social safety net, Black renters in New Orleans, many of them families with children, are at the highest risk of being evicted. Those with disabilities, members of the LGBT community, and renters with criminal records continue to experience discrimination disproportionately. And Black communities across the state bear the brunt of environmental racism, from pollution to the impacts of climate change. This theme also honors the legacy of advocacy and organizing historically and present day in the South. We've worked with partners to accomplish some incredible things over the years. After a decade-long push with the Healthy Homes Coalition, which is made up of 57 community partners and organizations, Renters now have protections when they report health and safety violations on their rental units. With community efforts to advocate for investing more local dollars in housing, the city earmarked a historic $22 million, doubling what New Orleans spends annually. This includes a $17 million investment in the newly created Housing Trust Fund dedicated to affordable housing development. 2024 also marks Ffac's 18th annual Fit for a King Summit, which honors Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s central role in the struggle against segregation and the historic passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968. With this event, we hope to lift up the critical role that movements across the South play in creating transformative change. We're inspired by the brilliance of organizers and advocates who continue to find new ways to push forward in their efforts in the face of many obstacles. It is proof that when we fight, we can win. We're honored to highlight their work throughout the summit this year, and we appreciate your support of housing justice. We hope that you'll continue to be involved with Ffac's efforts to eradicate discriminatory policies and practices while offering new and equitable models. You can find a full agenda for today's program at fitforaking.org/agenda. Now, just some housekeeping items for today. So if you have any questions for speakers, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you have technical questions about Zoom or Ffac's work throughout the day, you can reach us by email at info@lafairhousing.org or chat Ffac's staff in the chat. So there's a blue box avatar on Ffac's staff's Zoom profile, and you can chat them there in the box. Before we get started with today's program, I would like to share a little bit of information about Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. Our mission is to eradicate housing discrimination throughout the state of Louisiana. We know that housing discrimination leads to segregation and that neighborhoods and communities are not treated fairly. Housing discrimination has to end if this nation is ever going to achieve racial and economic justice. We work to end housing discrimination in several ways. Our education and outreach team provides fair housing training to make sure people throughout our community know their rights and responsibilities. Our policy team works at the local, state, and national levels to push for policies that make housing more fair and accessible to everyone. The enforcement team investigates complaints about fair housing violations to find out when and where housing discrimination is occurring. Staff also assists victims with filing administrative complaints and lawsuits to hold discriminators accountable. The housing counseling team provides a variety of housing counseling services, including for homeowners facing foreclosure. And last, Ffac's has added an eviction defense program, which I think was added during the pandemic to provide legal representation for residents facing eviction, including undocumented community members who may not qualify for other services. We are a statewide agency that works in tandem with partner organizations and community members, and we could not do this work without you. So we want to thank you. We would love for those of you on the program today to get more involved, and there are several ways you can do that. One, by working with us to offer fair housing training to your staff, members, clients, or students, making referrals to our programs, providing input on policies that impact your community, alerting us if you see housing discrimination in any form, completing our action alerts, or becoming a mystery shopper, or what we call a tester. You can read more about our work at lafairhousing.org.
It seems like we're frozen. Just give us a second to figure it out.
Yep, one moment, please. All right, just a moment while we sort out some of our technical difficulties. Amika will be rejoining us in just a moment. I'd like to share, I'm the Ffak's Director of Education and Outreach, and that there are some really meaningful ways that you can get involved with our work. We offer a wide variety of different kinds of fair housing training to your staff, members, clients, students, anyone you know who might need to know more about their rights and responsibilities in terms of housing justice. We make referrals, so when people call us and they're having some issues, um, we are able to assist with referral information. We can provide input on policies that impact your community. You can always call us or email us. Our phone number is 504-596-2100 to alert us if you see housing discrimination in any form. Um, we send out action alerts periodically for our community to help work towards policies that make housing justice possible for everyone in Louisiana. And we're also always looking for people to become mystery shoppers with us or testers. So you can read more about our work at lafairhousing.org. Um, and um, Finally, we're excited about the work that we've done over the past year, but we know that we are facing challenges to protect those victories and to keep pushing for housing justice across Louisiana. And your support makes that possible. So we're asking people in our network to consider signing up as a recurring donor in any amount today. And you can sign up today at lafairhousing.org/.
Thank you, Silas. I appreciate you jumping in there. I lost Wi-Fi somehow. Um, okay, so now I'd like to introduce Monique Blossom, Ffak's policy director, who'll be moderating our first panel. Monique?
Hi, Amika. Thank you. I hope that the Wi-Fi situation improves, and thank you to Silas for hopping in there. My name's Monique Blossom. I'm the Director of Policy here at Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. And today we'll be discussing our panel that's called Southern Futures, Youth Justice is Housing Justice. I'd like to remind everyone to please participate in our question and answer in the Q&A function, not in the chat. And please feel free to go ahead and answer those questions while the conversation's going on instead of waiting until the end. Also, as a reminder, everyone can see the full agenda, including speaker bios at fitforaking.org/agenda. And if we could please have that posted in the chat, I'd greatly appreciate it. So now if our panelists would like to come on camera, I will start introducing them. First, we have Ashley Hill Hamilton, who serves as the policy manager for Louisiana Center for Children's Rights and has served on boards such as NOLA Mom Nebus, Maternal Child Health Coalition, and the Racial Equity Board of Lift Louisiana. She currently serves as the Ascend Parent Advisor with the Aspen Institute. Hamilton is invested in children having the tools and support they need to thrive and feel safe within their communities. Thanks for joining us, Ashley. Next, we have Shirani Jayasuriya, who serves as Rides Communications Manager. Shirani received her BA in Cultural Studies and Comparative Literature and Post-Colonial Theory from the University of Minnesota. She also acquired many years of experience in advocating for racial and economic equality for the Minneapolis park system. Shirani is a graduate of the 2022 Committee for a Better New Orleans Leadership Forum and uses her experience to further her work in diversity and inclusion in the New Orleans area. Thank you for being here. And lastly, we have Christina Alarmo, who serves as Community Health Director for the Institute of Women in Ethnic Studies. She received her MSW from Wheelock College in Boston, Massachusetts, and has worked in local substance abuse residential programs as a child development specialist, family therapist, and admissions counselor. Christina continues her advocacy while focusing on other interests, including decolonization, indigenous sovereignty, and the demilitarization of Oceania. So thank you to all three of you for being here today. We're really excited to get your input and have this discussion. As an intro, Ffak's recent investigations into family status discrimination have shown a rate of discriminations towards family with children of over 50%. Our testers with children experienced higher fees, increased rules, additional application steps, and even saw housing providers refuse to rent or sell to them. Even when families with children are able to find housing, they often face eviction as renters. A recent report published in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences showed that 7.6 million individuals facing eviction each year. Of those, 40% of them were children, 2.9 million children a year facing eviction. However, we also know that guaranteeing stable housing for young people has a deeply healing effect for our communities. Youth programs have the largest cost-benefit ratio in preventing crime and violence of all developmental crime prevention programs. So to get this conversation started, so I'm listening and not speaking so much, Christina, I'd like to discuss not just evictions, but housing insecurity for children and families. With your work with Hotel Hope, you've observed that women who you noted are already approved for housing were able to secure housing more quickly in the past than they are presently. Can you tell us about your work with Hotel Hope, the obstacles to secure housing for these families, and the impact of longer shelter stays?
Hi, everyone. Yes, so with my role at the Institute of Women in Ethnic Studies, we call it IOS for short, we have had a partnership with Hotel Hope since 2019. And Hotel Hope is a shelter for women with children located in the Broadmoor neighborhood of New Orleans. And it is a renovated former motel turned into a shelter. So very special program. And, you know, when we started our partnership in 2019, it was typical for women to remain in the house about 30 days. And then, sometimes they would extend to about 45 days to give people a little extra room to find an apartment. So at this stage of being in Hotel Hope, it's all about finding an apartment, right? And moving in. Unfortunately, I've noticed over the years that 30-day to 45 window is no longer sufficient. So that means that women and families are remaining in shelter for longer periods of time. That also means if families are remaining in shelter for longer periods of time, fewer families are being served by these shelters. And so, some of the reasons that have been given, that have been speculated about, why this is happening is a so-called housing shortage. That is something that I've heard a lot over the years, this phrase housing shortage. And I would disagree that we have a housing shortage here in New Orleans. On my block, I know that there are homes that are not occupied by long-term residents. If you walk around any neighborhood, you will see that there are vacant homes. And so what I would say instead is that we have a shortage of affordable housing that is attainable for families in New Orleans. I think another barrier that our families face is that here the minimum wage is $7.25, which is quite low compared to other places in the country. And even so, that minimum wage being so low, in my zip code alone, the fair market rate for a 2-bedroom is $1,300. The fair market rate for a 3-bedroom apartment in my zip code is $1,760. So these costs are very challenging, especially for families with a single income to support the household. Another thing that I want to mention is that when families, right, are in a position where they have to stay in shelter longer than they expected, the mood can change, right? So imagine moving into the shelter, you start to adjust, you start to feel settled. It's called Hotel Hope because people come in feeling full of hope. But when they actually go into the process of trying to find an apartment and discover that it's taking longer than expected, it's more difficult than they expected, that hope diminishes. And so that leads to more frustration, right? That impacts feelings of despair, mental health. And it also means that the children, right, themselves are prevented from being in a stable home where they can have space. And so, children need space to do their homework, right? To have peace and quiet, to take breaks between siblings. We know that that is important. To have a safe yard to play in, right? All of these things are key. And so not only do these families want to find a place they can afford, they want a place that's actually safe and welcoming to children, right? And not every neighborhood that has an apartment that is affordable meets those basic needs. Is it safe for a child to be on this block? Would you want your child on this block, right? Another thing that I think is of concern, especially, is for parents in recovery. So one of the key things that we say about relapse prevention, right? This very common phrase, change your people, places, and things. And so for folks who are, committed to maintaining their recovery, maintaining their sobriety, changing their people, places, and things is key. And so that adds a an additional challenge of finding affordable housing that is safe for your children, but is also not a busy, drug area. So I think that, all of these are sort of things that we're seeing, challenges that families are facing, that are very big. And, these things unfortunately are out of families' control, and are stopping them from really obtaining what they need to.
Great, Christina, thank you so much for all of the information and insight there. We're going to speak about transit here in a moment. And so I'm curious to know for you, I think anybody, whether you're buying a house or renting one, you have to get from place to place, go to lots of different locations to meet people, walkthroughs, putting down payments, etc. How are the families at Hotel Hope? Are they relying on public transportation in that process to secure affordable housing?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say more often than not, the families do not have a car, and so they do rely on transportation. So imagine if you are living in Broadmoor, right? You're staying at the shelter in Broadmoor, and you have an appointment to view a place in New Orleans East, and you have appointment to check out a place in Algiers. It's a big challenge, especially if you have children, right? You don't have not everyone has the access to childcare. Not everyone's children are school age. And so if you're trying to navigate all of these things, you've got a diaper bag, you've got a stroller, you're holding the hand of your toddler. It is a lot to manage. You've got your documents together, right? It is a big challenge.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Sharani, now on to you. Ride was in, oh, sorry, I have the wrong question pulled up. In both the housing world and the transit world, we say that a major determining factor of success is your zip code. With the ongoing affordability crisis and continued gentrification of historically Black and Brown communities in New Orleans, Black and Brown communities continue to be pushed further away from the city center. What does this mean for young people's ability to access transit? And can you tell us about Ride's work to address those needs and how you do that work?
Absolutely. Monique, thanks for having me. And I think Christina really set the scene beautifully. The farther out Black and Brown families are pushed, the worse their access is to transit and to the ability to get where they need to go. It takes them significantly longer to get anywhere. And it usually involves taking more than one bus. And as Christina was saying, if you're juggling children and all of your paperwork and you're nervous already and you're maybe late for your job, it's unattainable. And to be completely transparent, our transit system currently as it is struggles to provide reliable access to folks who are already in the city center, let alone those who are in the outskirts of the parish. As families continue to be displaced, it's increasingly difficult to rely on transit to get to quality education, to get sustainable careers, grocery stores, internships, medical services, basically every single opportunity and resource that creates a thriving city. So with youth, these are the opportunities that create positive outcomes. I mean, if a young person lives in the East and is offered a life-changing internship downtown, but it takes multiple buses and multiple hours to get there, chances are they won't be able to get or keep the job. And what does that mean for their future? So at RIDE, we are a transit rider advocacy organization, and we center the most vulnerable riders, Black and Brown riders, youth, seniors, anybody from a transit reliant population. We ensure we're focusing our outreach and advocacy around their transit needs. We hold focus groups and listening sessions, especially around the areas where people are displaced and where displaced families live. We meet people where they're at by going to bus stops, transit hubs, and actually getting on the buses. And we advocate for transit agencies to create equitable access, especially in these further out areas where we're finding families need it the most. We also work on amplifying, actual rider voices. So when riders are empowered to advocate for their needs, the decision makers hear their stories rather than solely relying on our data and numbers, which of course we also provide, but it's so much more powerful to hear it from people who are affected every single day, just trying to get where they're going. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that and for your important work. Ashley, we're going to come to you now. In your work, you've observed that justice-involved children that the Louisiana Center for Children's Rights serves are experiencing housing insecurities before they go into the system and also when they return. Can you speak about how safe, healthy, and stable housing can improve public safety and the consequences for young people when they don't have that sort of stable housing?
Sure, thank you, Monique. And I'm glad you asked that question. In the state that we're in today with the Louisiana legislature and a lot of the changes that have been going on, a conversation that's top of mind for many New Orleans residents, for most of us, including myself, is public safety. The children that we work with at the Louisiana Center for Children's Rights, we provide legal representation, wraparound services such as social workers, investigators, youth advocates for children who are justice involved. The majority of the children that we serve do not have secure housing, and it starts there. So when we talk about public safety, what typically or often comes to mind for individuals, for lawmakers is, okay, we need more police, right? We need to reduce crime, we need to lock people up, and we need more police. And actually, that is a very limited way of thinking about public safety. So many people have challenged in recent years this idea of what public safety actually is. And public safety actually is it's talked about by Barry Freeman, and I was reading an article from New York University School of Law, and they're talking about public safety expansively in this way of it's making sure that all individuals in the community feel safe. And we're actually doing ourselves a disservice if we only think about it in a limited way around policing. So that means making sure that there is food security, making sure that there is housing security, making sure that individuals in layman's terms don't have to like scramble for their basic human needs. So children deserve to be safe. They deserve to exist in environments. One of the things we always talk about with our clients, with the children that we serve, is not only are our children involved in the justice system because they've been failed so many times and have not had the resources that they needed to be able to live safely and to thrive, they're afraid. They don't have secure housing. They may not be able to go, they may have to like be outside or hang out with groups of people or take a car ride or do something because they don't have somewhere to sleep at night. So they're really going from hour to hour, just making sure that they can make it until that next moment. And that's no way to live. You're not rested, So when we think about the children that we serve, we're not talking about kids who are getting out of school and having the luxury of being able to just go home and start their homework, right? Or being able to wake up in a comfortable bed and get ready in the morning and brush their teeth and go to school. They're trying to survive. So we have entered the conversation of talking about housing because secure housing and stable housing for children and their families, because there's no way that we can talk about public safety, and there's no way we can talk about serving our youth without their basic needs being met, and their basic needs are not being met. They are our neighbors. They are the people who, children of people who we work with and family members. And in New Orleans, there's so many children who are not, who do not have housing there. Couch surfing, they are sleeping in cars, they are from pillow to post, and there are just not enough resources to support them. And it needs to be a permanent solution where they not only have a place to sleep for a night or just a shelter, but where they can have safe and secure and affordable housing for themselves and their families to be able to thrive ongoing.
Yeah, and thank you, Ashley, for uplifting the experiences of the young people that you serve and the real need for permanently affordable housing in the city. You've also provided a really great transition to talk to Sharani again about a community-wide effort through the Big Easy Budget Coalition that worked at with the city budget to see that we were making real investments of federal and local dollars in the city to build our communities and address the root causes of violence, instead of giving all of that money to law enforcement. RIDE, Shirani, was an instrumental part of this coalition, which was a group of 35 or more nonprofit and community organizations. Can you tell us about your successful advocacy that resulted in $2.5 million for the Youth Zero Fares program, and give us some updates on the program's implementation?
Absolutely. We're super excited about it. So to sort of set the stage, a while back, we released a report exploring the possibility and benefits of zero fares for youth on transit. There's a huge amount of research that suggests providing zero fares helps increase access, helps increase ridership, and then helps young people eventually become confident adult riders. So when we're talking about youth, and when we're talking to youth in our outreach, something that I heard over and over again was, especially youth from vulnerable populations, they could be using the money they're spending on bus passes for groceries, for even putting it towards rent. So it was super, super clear that the need was there in our community. And as a result of that report, we were able to connect with the Big Easy Budget Coalition, which put us in the position to advocate for that $2.5 million in front of City Council, and eventually to win it. And that's ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds. So the Big Easy Budget Coalition helped us create connections between all of these super important equity issues. I mean, transit intersects with youth issues, it intersects with housing issues, it intersects with violence prevention issues, education, basically everything. So it was really, really perfect to connect with y'all. Back to the program. We're working on creating a 1-year pilot program for Opportunity Youth, ages 16 to 24, to be able to ride transit with zero fare. They won't have to pay at all to get on the bus or the streetcar or the ferry through Regional Transit Authority, RTA. So we're partnering with the New Orleans Children and Youth Planning Board, and we're partnering with the New Orleans Public Library to make sure that we're creating a program that best serves the youth of our community, and to make sure we're creating a program that's accessible and as low barrier as possible. We're excited to launch the pilot, hopefully later this year. Please keep an eye out for more information as we get it together. And we'll be doing lots of outreach in the Opportunity Youth communities to make sure that we're really getting at the heart of their needs. And along with that pilot, we're also really excited to be putting together a youth transit literacy program. And that is working with youth at schools, working with youth at any Opportunity Youth serving program to make sure that they have the soft skills they need to take transit confidently. I hear all the time that youth aren't taught how to read maps in schools anymore. So soft skills like map reading, trip planning, even reading a schedule, a timetable can be really difficult for folks who have not had the opportunity to do it in the past. Using the RTA app, it can be very confusing, especially when it doesn't work right, which happens more than they'd like to admit, probably. So we get folks together, we meet them where they're at, and we make sure they know how to use all these resources so that when they get on the bus, they're not worried about going to the wrong place. They're not worried about getting lost. They're not worried about, they don't have to worry about that one more thing when they're on their way to whatever important place it is they need to get to. So we're really excited about both of those programs. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for empowering young people with those skills. As a housing policy person, I love a map. So more map literacy sounds like a huge win for me. Christina, I'd like to go back to you. We've touched on the fact that despite children being children, they're having to operate as adults in New Orleans. Can you speak more to the experiences of and housing needs of college-aged or the 18 to 24-year-olds, particularly LGBTQ youth?
Sure thing. So I would argue that this population of older adolescents are a very neglected population here in the city, and I think also across the country. You know, our older adolescents, our 18-year-olds, our 24-year-olds, society puts very high expectations on them, but at the same time does not offer the same amount of support and access to resources. And so, this reminds me of some of the work that IWES has done in schools. With partnering schools, we have done what we call emotional wellness screens. And part of the purpose of that is to see where the student body is at, connect people to referrals if needed, and in extreme cases, seek hospitalization for suicidality. And one of the things that is on the screen is a question about how many times have you moved? And so as the social worker reviewing this screen to see, okay, how do I need to plan who I need to talk to? That question, seeing that on the form was initially a surprise to me, like, oh, why would they ask this question? But then I started to see the answers. So asking middle schoolers, how many times have you moved? And I'm seeing 6 times, 5 times, 11 times. So this is a lot of movement, right? So you just imagine that experience of not being in one place for too long. And then we expect when they turn 18 to understand how to establish long-term housing and how to make that smooth transition, when a lot of them themselves did not experience that, in their childhood. And so I think, especially when it comes to LGBTQ youth, this is an additional concern. One of the challenges that this population faces is sometimes rejection from family. And so if one is pushed out or runs out because their primary caretakers are not accepting of their gender identity or their sexual orientation, then the young person is kind of out there with less resources, right? And unfortunately, we see our youth who are under these circumstances end up in some pretty tough situations. So, if you look at any of our local mutual aid, social media or organizations on social media, you'll see the youth posts housing crisis, mental health crisis, housing crisis. And so when young people don't have that support, when they don't have the stable housing, it leads to crises. It can lead to emotional problems, hospitalizations, right? And I think that the group homes and the shelters that are available to this older adolescent age range, are resource limited. They don't have the funds that they need to truly meet the needs of their youth. I think that they're doing the best that they can with what they have, but they need more. So imagine you're a young person, right, who has experienced a history of trauma, which we know is very high in youth in this city. And you are, whatever circumstances led you to being placed in one of these group homes or shelters, being placed in a room with 2 sets of bunk beds, where now you have 3 roommates who are in the same situation as you, it can be a recipe for trouble, right? And so that's part of my concern. And one of my colleagues earlier mentioned soft skills. There's a lot of skills that go into living successfully on your own beyond just having the funds, right? So communication with your roommates, being able to plan your day, knowing how to keep your house clean, knowing what to do if you find mold, how to advocate for yourself with the landlord, what to do if there's evidence of rodents, right? What to do if you feel unsafe in your home. And so I think that a lot of young people are just kind of out there and struggling and not knowing where to turn. And yeah, I think there's a lot more that can be done, and they're just really not given the attention that they deserve.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And so I'll open this to everyone, and Ashley, I'm going to start with you. The theme for this year's summit for Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center is "As goes the South, so goes the nation: what the South can teach the fair housing movement." And to wrap our panel on Southern futures and youth justice as housing justice, what do you think the nation can learn from the experiences of the young people you serve or work with, and your fight for youth justice?
For sure. One of the things we say all the time is that if incarceration worked, that Louisiana would be the best in crime and education and all of those things, and we continue to come in last. And it's because we are not looking at creative solutions. We are not really focusing on people and their needs and really looking at what's going on in the state of our city, the state of Louisiana, as really a cry for help, and seeing the areas in which we are not thriving, the areas that we are not doing well. If we are seeing an uptick in crime, as we have seen nationally, with COVID-19, and if we see increases in things with children, what we should do is not look at that and say, okay, the children are bad, right? Or we need to lock them up, or longer sentences. No, children who go into facilities come home. They come back to our communities. So what type of individual do we want them to be when they come home? We want to make sure that they have the services that they need and really work preventatively to make sure that they don't go in. So we're seeing programs surface, they're Safe, Hopeful, Healthy in Baton Rouge, where they're really taking a creative approach to things. Here in New Orleans, the Department of Health is working with the violence interrupters to really stop retaliation and stop work at violence prevention from a public health perspective and stop things before they start. So there's a saying that I'm going to butcher, I always do. But it says that if children don't feel the warmth of the village, they will burn it down to feel its love. And that's what we're experiencing. That's what's happening right now. The children that we serve are not bad children. They're amazing human beings. They're wonderful. They're some of our best, brightest, and most talented individuals and human beings who are just hurting and who have been experiencing things and not having a fair chance and just their basic needs met for a very, very, very long time. And that starts with the comfort of a home, of being able to have transportation. New Orleans is, in Louisiana, like we are like the #2 food desert in the country. So people in our communities just don't have their basic needs met, and they're crying out for help. And time after time, we have lawmakers and legislators ignoring that, or saying that we have to, they want to appease constituents of certain areas and certain neighborhoods because they're applying pressure. So we really have a responsibility to apply pressure on lawmakers, on legislators, and let them know that there are other options, there are other solutions, and that the people are interested in that.
Great, thank you so much. Sharani, would you like to go next and speak to what the nation can learn from the experiences of the young people you serve and your fight for youth justice?
Absolutely, thank you. Youth deserve access to all of the opportunities our city has to offer, and they deserve reliable transit to get there. End of story. But unfortunately, transit funding isn't an issue that's heavily rallied behind here locally. I mean, we won that 2.5 million in ARPA funds, but once that money is gone, it's gone for good. So we'll have to use our data to make a case for sustainable funding for that program to continue after the year pilot. We'll always have to be scrambling to get the money that our riders need and deserve. But something that I really appreciate is here in New Orleans, we're no longer working in a silo to get that. We're thinking about how we can partner with other organizations, how we can offer a wider range of services and wraparound resources and help people for every part of their needs, not just transit, not just housing, not just education. And I think ultimately it's that collective power that's going to create sustainable, positive change in our communities. And just a personal ride plug here. If you'd like to be more involved in transit advocacy and transit justice, please go to our website, rideneworleans.org. Get involved. We have a Coalition for Quality Transit, which is our rider-led organizing arm. They meet monthly to discuss transit issues and how we can come up with solutions together to solve them. We have a board of directors that we're currently looking for new members for, and we have a policy committee we're currently looking for new members for. So if you are interested in looking at transit through an equity lens, please reach out to me, go onto our website, and let's work together to win world-class transit for New Orleans. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. And we, of course, look forward to partnering with RIDE moving forward, as always. Christina, we're going to have a brief question and answer after this, but if you'd like to speak also on what the nation can learn from the experiences of the young people you serve and your fight for justice, for youth justice.
Absolutely. So I think it's important to remember that this generation of adolescents, today's young adults, are Katrina babies. And so they came into this world at a catastrophic time for the city, and their starting line was one of huge financial deficit. So justice looks like giving them grace, access to resources, mentorship, and paving the way for them to achieve their dreams. And I think to help make this happen, I would love to see a just housing market, not just a fair housing market. Because to me, when I see those rates, I'm like, fair isn't so. But what we need is a just housing market and caps on how much landlords can charge for rent because it is out of control. And I've been inspired by RIDE to let you all know about a group which I am an organizer for called Trans Queer Youth NOLA. It was founded by middle schoolers who felt passionate about connecting with each other. They are engaged in youth-led mutual aid and organizing, planning activities. Adults can become involved as donors and volunteers. And in fact, we have a fundraiser party and drag show happening tonight at 5523 St. Claude starting at 6:30. And I will also drop that information in the chat. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. So to move on to a brief Q&A, we have some very close friends of Louisiana Fair Housing in the chat or in the question and answer, asking some questions. And so Ashley, I'm going to start with you with a question. Oh, and please feel free to make your individual plugs as well. But can you describe any experiences you've had with policymakers where you felt like you or the young people you work with were able to help them understand that creating stability in young people's lives is actually one of the best ways to increase public safety? And if so, what worked and how would you recommend other people talk to their elected officials and staff about this?
Yes, so actually, so we've had experience like in the past, and like most recently, we've actually been working with Council Member Freddie King. And we actually brought like several groups to the juvenile justice facility that's attached to the court, to JJIC. And during the visits there, we actually had some opportunities to speak with youth directly who are currently incarcerated. And we heard directly from them of like, what are your needs? You know, children have the most creative solutions. If we would just listen to them, we would be okay. And if adults would kind of like stop meandering around things and go directly to kids, they always have the answers. So speaking directly to them, and I think it makes a huge difference when you hear a story about, you know, I will talk all day, everyone. We have amazing advocates around the state who talk about the children and let everyone know how amazing they are. But when you actually sit face to face and you have that human interaction and you're able to humanize a person where you're not looking at them around a narrative, or you're not creating this narrative of someone who doesn't exist, but you're looking at a real human being in the eyes and understanding that like, this is a child, that they are playful and asking them, what do you need? What did you need? What could have changed the outcome of the circumstances that you're currently in? I have not met a person who has not been moved by that. And it's been a slow process, of course, but getting other people engaged to be able to have conversations and talk to children. And we want to protect the children as well. We don't want them to be exploited in any way. So I think sometimes it's a fine line of having the right people come and talk to children and hear from them and their stories. I always straddle the fence with that, but I think it can be really impactful and move people to change. If you have the right people. Like I said, I always straddle the fence with that because I want to protect the children first and make sure that they're safe and that the people who they're interacting with are pure and are walking into that experience, knowing that the children are the experts and really being open and willing to listen to them. And sometimes the people who probably need to hear it most aren't always safe adults for those children to interact with.
Yeah, I think that's always important to remember that personal stories from individuals who are impacted carry so much power, but we have to be protective of the people that we're asking to do that work. So I greatly appreciate that. Let's see, we have a few other questions in the chat from Leah LeBlanc, our good friend over at Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance. How do we break through the lack of parking argument NIMBYs used to push back on multifamily developments during the public participation process? I don't know that I think that's more of a question for me that I'll answer in the chat once we're done here. I would ask of Christina and Sharani, in your experience, what do you see as the barriers to getting affordable housing built for the young people that we know that we need it in every community in New Orleans?
Well, I can jump in to say that that isn't an area that I have pursued, but what I can kind of imagine is that similar not in my backyard attitude. So I've seen the community push back against having rehabs in their neighborhoods. And so I would imagine that, trying to establish a group home for young people where there's not necessarily an authority figure, right, who is in charge, is something that communities may not want in their neighborhoods. I think when you look at the news over the past few years, listen to the radio, the discourse on youth is very negative. People often assume that groups of youth are up to no good, right? There's been different times in the city where people have tried to make rules about curfews so that youth wouldn't be out at night. So there is, I think, this pervasive hostility towards young people, especially groups of young people, especially young people who are of color. And so it's hard for me to imagine that such a thing would be embraced in a community that is actually safe for people to live in.
Yeah, thank you for that. Sharani, do you have anything to add?
So similarly, I think a lot about when they're talking about expanding transit routes from one area of the city to another, there's often a lot of pushback by communities that don't want people from another community in their area, not in my backyard. We don't want the youth from this community to be able to have access to us. And of course, it's steeped in racism, it's steeped in classism, it's steeped in all of those things. And I think it's probably very similar for housing issues. People don't want the housing complexes built because they're thinking, oh, that's going to bring in the crime, that's going to bring in this, it's going to bring in that. But in reality, I can speak specifically for transit. In reality, when you're adding transit to an area that's lacking, it usually creates, it supports the creation of development. It supports the creation of better housing. It supports the creation of access to food in a food desert. So it supports lots and lots of jobs. So we found quite the opposite. It does not bring in violence. It does not bring in crime. It does not bring in mischief. It actually brings in huge amounts of development and money into communities. So it's worth looking into from that angle. And I'm guessing, although housing is not my area of expertise, I'm guessing you'll see a lot of overlap between housing development and transit development.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I think we can bring this conversation to a close. Thank you to all of you for your time, your insights, and most of all, your important work. Because we know that without our young people, we have no future, because the young people are our future. And so we look forward to continuing our partnerships to uplift your work and support the young people in our city who so greatly need it. So thank you again. So I'll be staying on to present our Mondale Brook Award. If Representative Matt Willard would like to come on screen.
Hey, Monique. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. So the Mondale Brook Award is named after Senators Walter Mondale and Edward Brooke, who worked diligently to make the Fair Housing Act a reality and who finally succeeded in 1968, a week after Dr. King's assassination. We present this award each year because though we know change is made by movements, we also know it is greatly assisted by smart and savvy policymakers like yourself. This award is specifically for policymakers who have distinguished themselves as champions of civil and housing rights. And so to introduce you to our audience, Representative Matt Willard is this year awardee. He represents District 97, which includes the Gentilly, Mid-City, and Bayou St. John neighborhoods in New Orleans. He is a lifelong resident of Gentilly, a graduate of Jesuit High School and the University of New Orleans. When not serving in the state legislature, Matt is the Marketing and Communications Director at Fluence Analytics, a technology startup that provides continuous analytics and process control solutions for polymer and biopharmaceutical industries. That is a mouthful, and it sounds like very interesting work. Matt is an elected member of the Orleans Parish Democratic Executive Committee and was recently elected chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. The particular efforts we want to lift up and honor Matt here for today is his tenacity over 2 challenging years and going into a third, working at the state legislature to pass our Fair Chance in Housing bill in the face of fierce opposition from lobbyists and realtors. The bill is designed to remove barriers for people leaving incarceration or with criminal records from a constructive reentry to their families and communities. Ffak has worked closely with Matt and a broad coalition of community and criminal justice reform organizations and impacted advocates, many of whom you'll hear from here shortly. We've been proud to work with Matt because he's an effective and well-respected legislator, and he fully commits to the bills he carries with advocates. For the audience, if you can imagine having a very stressful so-called part-time job where years worth of your work is condensed into a very hectic, contentious couple of months, and you're working to carry as much good legislation as possible to improve the lives of people across the state of Louisiana and fight for much overdue justice, then you are imagining the work of our friend Matt here. Despite these significant challenges, you can always count on Matt to work with and take direction from advocates, commit to passing something that has teeth, and to be educated and convincing in his testimony and negotiations. And he does this because he truly cares about justice. And so Representative Willard, it is my great pleasure to present you. I don't have it physically, but we'll get it to you as soon as possible. Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center's 2024 Mondale Brook Award.
Thank you so much, Monique. I really appreciate your kind words. Serving in the legislature in Baton Rouge is challenging on an easy day. There really is no simple bill in Louisiana. Some of the easier bills that I've handled, I would get it off the House floor and then head into Senate committee and be greeted by a lobbyist in a red card and just scratch my head and wonder what happened. So it's very challenging, even on the easy days. But we know that the Fair Chance Housing Act is not something that will be easy for us to pass. I applaud you, your team, and all of our advocates who have worked on that legislation for the last 2 years. And I really thought in 2022, we were going to get it over the finish line. I really did. It was tough just to get it out of the House. We spent numerous hours meeting with stakeholders and committee members and chairpersons. And when we got over to the Senate side, I really was optimistic. And, a lot of times the lobbyists in the state of Louisiana control what goes through and what gets voted down. And we were a victim to that. And then again, we brought it back in 23 and, I had firm commitments ahead of that session that we would be able to get it through. And, what we saw is that people were afraid that a vote on the Fair Chance Housing Bill would affect their reelection campaign. And some of our friends chose to not stick with us. So I'm hoping, this is, and look, it's probably going to be tougher this year if we're being honest with ourselves. We have a new administration. We have new leadership in the legislature. We'll have new committee members. We'll have new chairpersons. So I'm not being naive. I know it will be tough. I'm going to scale back some of the legislation that I run. I won't be running as many bills because I really want to be able to dedicate my time to the legislation that I carry. But I also want to be able to dedicate time to helping my members. This role as chairperson of the House Democratic Caucus by itself is a full-time job, right? Not to mention serving the people of District 97, serving on my committees and trying to make a dollar as time permits. But this bill is very important. And I think I committed in 22 that I will carry it every session until that bill is signed into law. And that is still how I am thinking about it. I want to see this to fruition. I want this bill to become law. It is a priority for me. Some of the things that we discovered that didn't sit well with me also didn't sit well with some of my Republican colleagues, such as some of these apartment associations and managers are essentially generating revenue by collecting application fees, knowing that the person applying will never receive an apartment to this complex, right? So I don't know what you call that, but to me, that's a form of stealing. And I think that needs to be eliminated. And some of my Republican colleagues agreed with that principle. But at the end of the day, we should not be erecting barriers to people who have served their time, who are coming home, who are trying to reintegrate back into society. For them to do that, they need a job and they need housing. They need stable housing. And if they're discriminated upon because they do have that record, where are they supposed to stay? And if they cannot find anywhere to stay, what do we expect them to do? Many cases, they're going to reoffend, end back up in the prison system, cost the state more money, break up more families, more homes, and create, in some cases, more victims of crime. So this is a common sense policy suggestion from my part. This is a very easy bill for me to present and to advocate for. I'm very passionate about it. I remember in 2019, I was having conversations with my friend Kiana Calloway, and he was telling me this was one of his dream pieces of legislation. And I told him then and there that if I'm elected, we'll make it happen. We haven't done so yet, which means we still have work to do. And I look forward to working with you, Monique, and all of our partners and everybody on this call to get to the point where the Fair Chance in Housing bill becomes an act. So thank you so much for this award. It means a great deal to me. I can promise you that I will display it proudly in my office. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of this conference that you're all having. And if there's anything that me or my office can do for you, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Representative Willard. I think it's, to say the least, we're fully committed to carrying this bill with you until we can get it signed into law. And we're up for the fight and proud to do it with you. Kiana is actually on the next panel, so he's in the virtual
Tell him I
room.
gave him a shout out.
Yeah. And we'll get that award to you as soon as possible. Thank you for all you do for District 97, and to your legislative assistant, Courtney Moran, as well, for all of her hard work.
She's the best. She
Yes, she is.
keeps me together. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Well, it has been my pleasure to spend this morning with you. I'm now going to turn things over to our colleague Mo, who is going to discuss the break we'll be taking, and a raffle announcement.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mo Moore, the education coordinator here at Ffak. Before we take a quick break, I wanted to let you know that we have a raffle going on today where we will be giving away 4 books, 2 copies of The Wrong Complexion for Protection, written by Dr. Bullards, and that's his most recent book, and as well as 1 copy of Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall, and 1 copy of Just Action by Leah Rothstein and Richard Rothstein. The first raffle will be held at 11:30 a.m. and the second one will be held at 12:35 p.m. So stay tuned.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back from the break. Monique Blossom, Director of Policy, here again. I'm gonna turn the directorship of this over to Sarah Carthen-Watson, our Legal Director.
Thanks, Monique. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Carthen-Watson, Ffak's Legal Director, and I'm so excited to moderate this morning's panel on fair housing protections for people with criminal records. To set the stage for this morning's conversation, it's really important for us to acknowledge that Mississippi and Louisiana are capitals of mass incarceration, with Mississippi having the highest rate of incarceration in the world and Louisiana not far behind, having the largest maximum security prison in the country. Data reflects how unequal the burden of incarceration is for people of color in our society as well. For example, Louisiana's prison population is 65% Black, despite Black people only comprising 33% of the statewide population. Additionally, involvement with the criminal legal system is frequently used as a proxy for race discrimination, and people with criminal records, 49% of Louisianans, often face significant barriers to housing, especially if they have been in prison. We welcome activists with lived experience from organizations such as First 72 and Step Up Louisiana as they discuss the importance of local and statewide housing protections for people with criminal histories. First, I will introduce our panel. First up, we have Kiana Calloway, who is the founder of Project Detour. After serving 17 years in prison, he made it his mission to advocate for the marginalized by joining Roots of Renewal NOLA in 2017, serving as program director. He also received his AAS in criminology from SUNO and AAS in criminal justice and sociology from Loyola University, New Orleans College of Law. He currently serves as a fellow in both the Movement of Black Lives Electoral Justice League and the 2023 W.K. Kellogg Foundation Center for Creative Leadership. Welcome, Kiana. We also have Troy DeLone. Troy DeLone serves as a case manager at First 72. He received his BA in Christian ministry at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary and a master's in social work at Southern University at New Orleans. Delone has 6 years of experience as a reentry social mentor, and he helps men rehabilitate themselves through teaching life skills classes. Welcome. We also have Tasha Williams, who serves as Step Up Louisiana's New Orleans and Jefferson Parish Economic Justice. Alongside Step Up Louisiana, she analyzes racial justice issues in order to advocate for education justice and economic justice in Louisiana areas. Welcome, Tasha. And last but not least, we have Keisha Edwards, who serves as Step Up Louisiana's Operations and Organizing Coordinator. She, alongside Step Up Louisiana, analyze racial justice in order to advocate for education and economic justice in Louisiana areas as well. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I think this will be a really good discussion. This is an issue that Ffak's enforcement staff and policy team have worked really, really hard on over the last couple of years. So I'm really excited to hear you all's thoughts on how we can protect folks and increase opportunity. So let's start with the basics. And anyone can answer this, but how does the involvement with the criminal justice system impact one's ability to find housing, and how might race and gender exacerbate those issues?
Yeah, I guess good morning, everybody. I guess I'll lead off on that one. Through my experience as a case manager for reentry court, one of my duties is for one of my services I provide to our clients is to find stable housing. And it's always a challenge because a lot of pretty much all the clients that we serve face discrimination because of their criminal record. A lot of people that they seek housing from, to rent from. One of the things that or one of the reasons that I would say the main reason that they be denied is because they have a criminal record. And so, we have to go that extra mile to try to find those who are unbiased and who are willing to give people opportunity to have housing in spite of whatever their past may be. You're not, just because you had, some issues in your past, that doesn't define the person that you are today. Just giving everybody equal opportunity and a chance, to be able to have stable housing, in spite of them having a criminal record. That's one of the biggest challenges that we face in trying to find housing for people formerly incarcerated.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yes, definitely. Good morning, everybody. I kind of second that notion. Safe and stable housing should be a human basic necessity, no matter your criminal background history. And currently, the intersection of race and gender often plays a significant role in the decisions made regarding incarcerated individuals. It's most important to acknowledge that incarceration has disproportionately affected Black and Brown communities, leading to ongoing trauma and stigma. And while there are platforms and resources available to help many of these people, but they're not easily accessible or visible. And I strongly believe that these services should be easily accessible to those that need it, even if it means meeting these individuals at the front gate. After returning home from incarceration, after serving all of that time for a crime that I did not commit, might I add, I just thought that I was going to come home and just get back on the ball until I was slapped with so many collateral consequences that lingered after incarceration that it was just unbelievable. And it's crucial that these individuals are provided with the necessities and resources and support to obtain safe and stable housing upon their release. And it's unacceptable for individuals that are held beyond their release dates because they don't have a deemed house to return home to. And that's the issues that we're dealing with. How can we put a face to incarceration and humanize the individuals instead of continuing to smash their existence in the mud? I have been working with young men returning home from incarceration between the ages of 18 and 26. And that's the most important age of your processing. And after serving juvenile life inside of these institutions and returning home, there's no accountability. There's no follow-up. There's not even any type of services or support or even a check to say, here, this is for you to get on your feet. They just expect these young men to come home, strap up their bootstraps, and figure it out. And I believe that individuals like myself, individuals like Troy, that stand up for the male population. And then here we go, once we counterattack that, we have individuals like Tasha and Keisha that stand up for the female population of the formerly incarcerated people to ensure that we can do all within our power to help these individuals get the tools that they may need to get themselves successfully back on track. But we are fighting and arguing and disputing against a system that was created by design, right? It's not by accident. It's not by accident that the nation's incarceration population is 5%, but the state of Louisiana's incarceration population is over 35%. It makes no sense that we can invest more into prison enterprise than we can invest into education. So when we talk about being disenfranchised, when we're talking about being discriminated against, housing is just one of the issues that we address on a daily basis. There are over 40,000 collateral consequences that linger over the heads of formerly incarcerated people returning home from incarceration that just, if you're not resilient, the recidivism rate will continue to skyrocket. So it takes individuals such like the names that I just called, and there are a plethora of other individuals who are doing this work. There are many individuals who are engaging in the life's work of ensuring the full restoration of individuals returning home from incarceration. If you can think about it, right? If you serve anything over 6 months inside of a penal institution, once you're released, it's like you're coming home filing bankruptcy. You have nothing. You lose your home, you lose your car, you lose your morale. Sometimes you're placed in so much inhumane and unconstitutional situations that you may come home and lose your mind. But there are no transparency clauses. There are no accountability. There is nothing that can ensure that the individual is put first over policy. And I would like to salute Representative Matt Willard for getting on this call earlier and talking about his dedication and his tenacity to work with us, frontlining, not just up there in the legislation building in the state capitol talking about these issues, but Matt has been attending community-driven organization teach-ins, town halls, meetings since before he was even considering running for these positions. So that's the type of people that we need to continue to put in position that has the population's best interests at heart. Because if we continue to do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got. And that's why I feel to believe that now it's time for us to come together collectively, work on all fronts, because these conversations are far in between, but there are many. And I want to kind of end this segment with this Dr. Martin Luther King quote, in reverence to what this week will lead up to, right? being fit for a king. If there's a threat to justice anywhere, it's an injustice. If there's injustice anywhere, then there's a threat to justice everywhere. And that's what we're here to talk about. How can we open up the eyes of individuals who don't believe that we, us, not just Kiana, but we, us collectively, should not have access to stable and secure housing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiana. And Keisha and Tasha, I want to give you a chance to weigh in, but for the folks in the audience, Kiana, could you just follow up on one thing? You mentioned that there are some people who are held beyond their release date because they aren't able to access housing. I think a lot of people may not know that or understand that. Could you talk just a little bit more about that?
Yes, I can. So there's actually a situation that I'm working with right now. There's an individual who has just went up for the parole board and made parole maybe about 5 months ago, and he's still currently housed in Elaine Hunt's Correctional Center because he do not have a home to come home to. He served 25 years plus. In the process of serving this time incarcerated, he lost his mom, he lost his brother, he lost everybody that was close and a support mechanism for this individual. And now this individual has been held inside of the penal institution for 5 months after completion of sentence, after being granted the opportunity from the parole board to be released. And I think that that's unconstitutional in a large portion, right? And my heart goes out to him. I try my best to be that support system, but if personally Kiana is dealing with housing insecurities, and may I add, I've been home now 12 years, going on 13. I have superseded every aspect of what rehabilitation and reentry could look like, right? Whether it be attending college, whether it be mentoring young kids in the community to prevent them from ending up in dire situations, whether it be passing out food to homeless or figuring out ways that we can get homeless people from under the bridge, whether it be praying, whether it be walking by faith and not by sight. I still have lost over $7,000 in application fees trying to find an apartment. If it wasn't for a close friend, I'd probably be homeless. You know, my first 5 years, I was practically homeless, living from pillar to post, trying to figure out where my next state of comfortability will be at, right? So, but not to just say that, bring it on Kiana, but to say that if I had a stable place, he can use my address to come home, because I know what it feels like to wait and wait and wait and wait, and still there's no resolve. And if he don't find a place within the next 3 months, then they're going to revoke that parole, and that parole, he's going to be in there. How can we continue to allow that to happen in our penal systems? Where's the accountability factor? And I think that inside the state of Louisiana, that's just one case of probably out of 1,000 cases to where this is repetitive, right? This is something that is ongoing and has been ongoing for our institutions to continue to get collateral gain off of individuals that are practically poor and homeless, and you know what I mean, and can't come up out of those situations. So just raising a blind eye to that. Like, there are organizations who are working toward ending that type of inhumane treatment and unconstitutional treatment inside of those spaces for individuals who are just underprivileged.
Absolutely. I think that's so important, because we're not even talking about when someone is out and trying to find housing. We have people who can't even be released because you have to have that stable address in order to be released. So these barriers start before someone is even beyond the gates.
Yes, and that's another thing, not to just kind of, you know, try to override this conversation, but I think that it's a lot, it relies heavily on the way that our institutions are set up, right? For this individual to even much be considered for a parole hearing, there should be a reentry packet done, right? So the institution should already have these balls or these eggs in place for this individual to have a smooth transition, whether it be partnering up with First 72 or whether it be partnering up with other housing corporations that are providing houses for individuals that are coming home. But everything, all the ball has been dropped, right? So how can we continue to turn a blind eye to the individuals that are in power, the gatekeepers, the policymakers, the individuals who say this is not right, so that they can be held accountable for that, so we can have change, we can have real recourse on the way that we view these individuals coming home.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Tasha or Keisha, would you like to add anything?
Yes, this is Tasha. Just kind of wanna, Troy and Kiana pretty much filled everything out, but just wanted to add and piggyback off of what Kiana was saying, that not certain if you guys know, even if he is willing to let his friend that's actually incarcerated for 5 extra months come and stay with him, it's something that he would have to fight against as well, because they don't allow, even if it was your relative, they don't allow, two formerly incarcerated people, especially if both are still on paper. You know what I'm saying? And that goes for relatives as well. You know what I'm saying? I have a nephew that's actually in the same predicament right now in a halfway house, and I'm his aunt. I haven't been incarcerated in 7 years, and they fighting for him to come and stay with me. I'm not on probation or parole. I am formally incarcerated though, but they're not really allowing him to come and stay with me. Versus his mother has passed too since he's been incarcerated, and the situation goes as far as his sister having Section 8, right? He can't go and stay with his sister, right? So he's just really just sitting in, in a prison or whatnot, waiting for somewhere to place them pretty much in a home. So I just wanted to pretty much add that. And just like Kiana, again, myself, has lost thousands of dollars, filling out applications for apartments, and really feeling some sort of way to where this job right here, I had to tell Ben, look, stop taking taxes out of my money. You know what I'm saying? Because it's taxation without representation. For me to have to do this, I'm not a citizen. I just started voting at the age of 45. My first time ever voting in life was when I was 42 years old. You know what I'm saying? But I always retained a job, but I can't vote. I can't find an apartment. Like, what's really going on? So we need to look into that, pretty much more as well. That's it.
Thank you so much. Keisha, did you want to add anything before we move on to the next question?
Okay, y'all can hear me now? I think I was muted. Good morning, everyone. Just really short on this piece. One thing that I appreciate from Troy and Kiana is their diligence, that they work with, how they work with the young men. And it's saddened that women don't get the same recognition and the same opportunities that men get, right? And women are the pillar of the communities, of the homes, right? We are the caretakers. And so just imagine when a mother is taken out of the home, what does that does to the family? You already have the dad gone, and now you have the mother gone. So like, so the trauma that's invoked on the families becomes repetitive, right? And then other things start to take place, and other things start to happen with that family. And then that family becomes destroyed. And then you ask, well, how can we make this family whole again? It's literally impossible to make that family whole again when you have the mother gone, you have the father gone, and then you're going to start to have the children to do different things to accommodate. I have a friend of mine that told me that the reason that he started selling drugs was because his mother was working too many jobs and he wanted to see more of his mother. And that's why he started selling drugs. That's big. That's big, And so when we talk about formerly incarcerated people, and when we talk about the prison system, we first have to talk about education, and we have to talk about jobs. Like, if you want people not to go back to what they know they can get food from, they know they can get the money to pay rent, they know they have access to these things. See, that's the key thing, is access. Access to negative stuff is plethora, right? but access to basic human needs and the things that people need to survive is limited. And it shouldn't be that way. That's an injustice. And injustices should not continue to just plague our Black and brown communities, period. And so when we talk about what could we do? First of all, we need to make sure we have jobs. So when people come home, they have jobs. I mean, the prison system, people that's incarcerated get educated very well to say they come home and can't even use the education to get ahead. And I think that's something that we should start to, as a community, as a whole, start to look at, is how do we make it more transparent when people come home from incarceration to get adequate employment. Sustainable employment. Let me say that. Sustainable employment. Not adequate, sustainable, because there's transition employment and then there's sustainable employment. So people need sustainable employment. And think about it. If you have a job, when you get off your job, you're tired, right? You want to go home, you want to lay down, you want to rest. How can you do that without a house? You know? So it has you to, as a human, choosing resources or opportunities that you would normally never choose if you would have just had your own house. You know, if you would have just said, my boy let me come stay on his couch, my girl let me come stay, but you don't know what your boy or your girl still into, and you're not into that no more. And so that, you know, it's easy to get caught up into that kind of stuff. So that's all I wanted to add at this time.
Thank you for that. So we've identified a lot of barriers. We've identified barriers to people even being able to be released because they don't have a stable address once someone is released, not having application fees, not being able to find employment. And a lot of these things are cyclical, right? Like if you don't have a stable place to live, you don't have an address, you usually can't get a driver's license. If you have a driver's license, you might not be able to get a job. All of these things kind of play in together. So what tools do your organizations offer to assist people with criminal histories to access housing? And what are some tools that you wish were available that you don't currently have access to?
So I'll go first. With Step Up Louisiana, we have been working with the Housing Corporation to make sure that we're trying to find a median where formerly incarcerated people can come home and have a fair chance to housing. Meaning you're not looking at they background so much, but you're looking at, can they afford the place, first of all? Is this just one person or is it a family? Like those things should be considered when people are coming home. So for Step Up Louisiana, what we're doing is we're trying to change policy to make it better for formerly incarcerated people to come home. I wish we could do more. I wish we had the capacity to house more people, because I'm the former director of client service director of the First 72 Plus, where we were housing people. And I mean, right at the peak of COVID is when you had a lot of people that was being released from incarceration, right? And I mean, we had housed hundreds of people within that span of time. And it was a humbling experience for me, because like many of them said, they had people who had all their family was lost. Like their immediate family was gone. Mothers and fathers had passed away, sisters and brothers had passed on. And everybody's not letting you come stay in their house. You know, you got to realize, yeah, you coming home, oh, it's bittersweet, but have that family been emerged back together? Have that family been healed? Have that family been made whole? Because a lot of times drugs played a part in why you was incarcerated, right? You was addicted to some type of drug, you caused trauma and harm to your family. They don't want you around. They don't believe that you're reformed. They don't believe that you've changed your life. They don't believe that prison did anything for you. That's normal. That's human nature, right? So who can we count on to do those things? Who do we have to do those things? They say those that's closer to the problem is closer to the solution, but furthest away from the resources. That is an absolute true fact. Because me, Troy, Kiana, and Tasha, we're all close to the problem. We all are close to the solution, and we are all farthest from the resources. So for me, I really do wish the organization that I work for could do more, could expand the capacities that we do. We just can't. But we are trying with policy to make those things better for people with that's coming home from incarceration.
I would like this real briefly, as far as like solutions, possible solutions to the problems that we face with the barriers people face, formerly incarcerated people face with obtaining stable and sustainable housing. We have to, at the first 72 plus, we're a transitional housing organization, right? Which means that we only house people for a certain amount of time, trying to help them to transition to self sufficiency, right? And so we literally have to like go out into the community. And when I say we, I'm talking about the staff at the first 72, be it coaches, be it people that's in administration or whatever, over at the first 72. We literally have to go out in the community ourselves and try to find people who would be willing to rent to formerly incarcerated people. And you know what we find out a lot of times? That they have people out in the community that have the desire to help. However, they just don't have the support that they need to be able to provide the help that they want to provide. Like like I'm working with a guy right now who, man, if this guy could, man, he would house every single person that we can bring to him. However, man, he's still struggling trying to get his properties together and trying to make it adequate enough for somebody to come live in and stuff like that. And I feel like that, man, there's too much money in this community, as far as like I'm talking about different buckets of money that the city council may have or this council may have and stuff, that they can provide like support to people such as this person that I'm referring to, who want to provide housing. He has some properties that he invested in himself, but nobody is giving him no support, man. He just trying to this, and I mean, man, he might make a couple of dollars here and there, but man, his heart is really into, man, I just want help, man. I just, because he was, and this goes back to what, our motto at the first 72 is us helping us, you know what I'm saying? He a formerly incarcerated person, so he been directly affected by this, right? And it goes right hand in hand to what Keisha was saying, people that's directly affected by this are the people that know and have the solutions, but they are the furthest away from the resources that they need to be able to provide the help that people need. So I'm gonna leave it at that because I know Kiana want to get up in there, but man, that's it right there, man. We need to try to empower those that have the desire and those who are already doing the work, but just need some more support, some more help, to be able to provide the things that people need, and why do we want to do this? Because we want to end this cycle of incarceration, we want to end this system of, it's like generational curses, that's continue to be perpetuated, from one generation to the next generation. And you see something on the news, where, this kid and did this and did that, and their first thing, oh man, they want to talk about how bad this person, but you don't want to look at the circumstances that and the situations that this kid was brought up in, the environment that this kid was brought up in, where his mama was in jail, his daddy was in jail, his sister in jail, his brother in jail. That's all they know is jail, you know what I'm saying? And that's all they ever, and it's not that this is the lifestyle that they chose, this lifestyle they want to live. This is the only thing that, it's no options. The options are limited, And I think back to when I was a kid, people like, oh no, they got options, they got opportunities available out there for everybody. But no, man, those opportunities not as accessible as people think they are. And then this is, and I'm gonna leave it right here. This is another thing, man. Some people don't even believe that those things even exist for them. It might be like that might be true for you, but that's not true for me and where I grew up at. That don't go for me. You know what I'm saying? That's TV to me. That's some like reality TV type stuff. I'm dealing with the reality that I face every day. You know, and until people really get to understand that, they don't really understand it until it affects them. Then now when it affects them, like I think about the opioid crisis that we done had, over the past couple of years. This been going on for years in the Black community. But you know what? When it got, Eminem said it best. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna quote Eminem right here. Eminem said, and look at where it's at, middle America. Now it's a tragedy. Now it's so sad to see. You see these little, different ethnic groups that's ODing and all that there. Now we trying to get all kind of programming and funding and all that there. Man, you should have been doing that. This ain't just started. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same thing what we talking about now with this fair housing and equal opportunities of jobs and all that there. It ain't gonna be no tragedy until it hit home. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna leave it at that because I'm.
Hey man, your passion speaks far beyond the normal ear, right? Because people hear this and it goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
And the first thing I always ask myself, are our children truly safe? And when you just said that, that brings us to this question that weighs heavily on my heart. Because in today's society, with so many issues and struggles, it's difficult to answer yes. Every day we hear stories of children being neglected, abused, and mistreated in their own homes, schools, and communities. And it is heartbreaking, and it is a heartbreaking reality that some children do not feel safe in their own house. The world can be a scary and dangerous place for children, and it is our collective responsibility to ensure their safety and well-being. We must work toward creating a society where all of our children feel safe and protected and loved. However, with the prevalence of violence and poverty and the lack of resources, it's hard to ignore the question, are our children really safe? Everywhere we look, we see signs of neglect. We see signs of danger for our youth. Abandoned buildings, overcrowded schools, the news stories of exploiting young people all adds up to fear. It all adds up to shaking up our communities. Even places that are meant to be safe havens, like churches and schools, are now requiring metal detectors and armed guards. It is a stark reality that our children are growing up in a world where they're not always protected and cared for. Our community and our society, in our community and in our society, it is crucial for us to prioritize our children's well-being and come together and ensure their safety. We must provide them with the necessary resources and support to thrive. And that relies on incarceration. I went to prison at 16 years old for a crime that I did not commit. You know why? Because I wasn't safe in my own streets. I wasn't protected. I didn't have the proper education and information that would help me to be productive and successful. Yeah, I could play football. I had college scholarships, but that didn't protect me from the Jefferson Parish Correctional Center. That didn't protect me from Orleans Parish Prison because we did not ensure our safety. And that's what this is about. Yeah, we're talking about formerly incarcerated people with housing discriminations. Yeah, we're talking about formerly incarcerated people with employment discriminations. Yes, we talk about formerly incarceration with educational discriminations. But do we center our children? That's where my mind was focused when I came home, that I do not want to see another Kiana, a 16-year-old Kiana Calloway sitting in prison with 2 counts of first-degree murder, sentenced to two consecutive life sentences without the possibility of probation or parole or suspended sentence. So what I did, when I went into those institutions, I walked into Angola in 1996. And in 1996, when I walked into you get processed on death row at that time, right? And when you walked there, it had a sign that said, "Don't serve time, let time serve you." That vivid image is still in my mind because I did not allow myself physically to serve time. Yeah, physically I was trapped. I had cuffs on my wrists, shackles on my feet, but they didn't imprison my mind. They couldn't imprison my mind because I knew God had a plan for me. I continued to walk by faith and not by sight and allow the enemy to become a step stool, which is where I am now, aligning myself with situations and individuals and conversations that will help me to better see how we can make a safer community for our kids. There are no protections in place for us, for people returning home from incarceration. There are no protections in place for Black people and brown people and our immigrant populations and our LGBTQ community. There are populations of individuals who are suffering in silence. They would rather go in their broken down homes or sleep in their vehicles and cry and cry and cry and then push themselves tomorrow to repeat that same cycle. How can we, as a community, push the butt by allowing our elected officials, the people that we put into positions, how can we push the buck to make them, look, excuse my language, man, you got to shit or get off the pot. People are suffering. People are hurting. And it's trickling down to our youth. If there are no resources that are in place, if there are no support systems that are in place, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. So that's why these kids are out there pulling door handles, trying to steal change, or looking for a firearm in individuals' vehicles, because there's nothing for me to do. Our schools are undereducated. We have are undereducating our kids. How we are allowing other people to come into our village and teach a culture that's absurd to the people that's in the communities. New Orleans right now is 100% charter. Nothing against charter schools, but where are our community leaders and our old teachers? I remember when I was going to school, my teacher was my mama friend, my principal, you know what I mean? Like she was familiar with me. So instead of them just saying, actually, I did a presentation at a high school. I'm not gonna call them out, but when they had their morning announcements on the intercom, they said, "We have good morning, all of our students. We have 586 warm bodies in the seats." It's a number game. Like that was 2 years ago, and I'm still like, did that really make sense? Are you really saying that? Not we have 586 inspirational thinkers or future leaders or our next scientists or the next president. They say warm bodies. That's the institutionalized mindset that we have here. And just because an individual is incarcerated to become institutionalized, we have more people that's out here that's institutionalized and really don't even know it. Waking up every morning to go punch the clock to go to work. That is an institution that we're continuing to support. Even though we have the discriminations in so many different areas, the recidivism rate for individuals who have served over 10 years incarcerated is practically zero. For individuals that go in for 5 years and come home and 2 years and come home, you're going to see that cycle because they haven't had the opportunity to get it together. So that's why we are the ones that are closer to the solutions, because we know how to put together peer support groups. We know how to teach financial literacy. We know how to find the individuals that need these services, because you know what we do? Troy just gave you a beautiful analogy of it. We meet people where they are. We go into the communities. We knock on doors. We do surveys. We try to figure out the best way that we can collectively work together so that that one voice can be a mountain to every impacted individual in our communities. And I feel like that's the best way to really affect the way that this cycle is rolling, the way that this cycle has continued to ongoing dismantle individuals, is that we need people's power. And I want to recite this quote by Leo Tzu. And it says, "Go to the people, live with the people, learn from the people, love them, start with what they know, build with what they have. Because the best leaders, when the work is done and the task is accomplished, they will say, we have done it ourselves. We've done it together." And that's why I believe that the influential spaces right here that you have created, which is a safe space where impacted people could stand here and unpack, right? Have this open dialogue to not only let them know that we are doing the work, but also tell them that, yeah, we hurting. We hurting because we see our people hurting. And the only way that we can all find a way to heal, let's hug each other. Let's love each other. Let's figure out ways that we can support each other and show these young men what masculinity is. Masculinity ain't, oh, I'm rough, I'm hard, I'm the man. No, masculinity is being empathetic. Masculinity is crying when you're in pain. Masculinity is opening up, loving, hugging, enjoying, being that carrier, being that pusher, being that puller. Because a lot of people need assistance, man, and we have jobs to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We have 2 more minutes and we do have one question in the chat. So I want to see if we can squeeze this in. We have someone who asked, can you touch on issues with partnerships with well-funded organizations focused on housing support? In my role, I've had a hard time making solid connections with organizations that are funded well by the city and have good outcomes because our clients are formerly incarcerated. So any advice on how to build partnerships with folks who have housing resources?
We out here, that, and what I mean by we out here is that, like, a lot of us, that the 4 of us that's on this call, I can definitely attest to that we are active, right? And there are other organizations that is doing the work. We have Catholic Charities doing great work. We have First 72, we have Vote, we have Justice and Accountability. Like, there are so many organizations, New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center, everyone has their own role to play. I think that the best thing for the individual who put that message in the chat is to figure out where you can fit in at, right? Because we bring value to the space. You bring value to the space. Figure out where you can go and not let one person turn you around, and continue to be active. Because individuals need support, man. If you want to really help someone that's dealing with discriminations, go under the bridge. Hey, man, like, we trying to, however it may be. But like I say, you have to figure out that why inside of you and be diligent and persistent with the organizations that's doing the work, because the work is definitely being done. But it's far too few, because there are over 1,600 people that's released monthly here in the state of Louisiana. There's not enough resources for all those people.
Sure.
So we need your support.
That's
Thank you.
what
I want to check. Oh, go ahead, Troy.
real briefly. That's what I was just about to state that I don't want to. I hope I don't want to rain on nobody or be this dark cloud or like that over this conversation, but that's why I raised the issue that I raised, because, to be honest with you and just be frank with you, there are no well-funded programs that can provide this service that we're talking about. So I put that out there so we can talk to our local representatives, elected officials, not just local, but the ones that's in Baton Rouge and in DC. We need to write, we need to get on them emails, we need to call their office, and we need to let them know, man, this is an issue. Right now, man, we've been marching and protesting about this new jail that they about to build and stuff, right? That's some funds right there. Instead of using them resources, that funds to build a new jail, how about building some housing You know what I'm saying? How about investing in some organization to try to curb some of this homelessness that we got, that Kiana spoke about, people living under the bridge? And not only that, but how about investing in some mental health services? Because I am a social worker as well. How about investing in some mental health services for some of these families that are just broken? It don't matter. People always trying to look at the people and judge them based on what they're going through and point the finger at them and all that there. Let's start being solution based instead of just always focusing on the problem. Let's focus on some solutions. Let's ask the question, man, why he out there pulling on door handles instead of this trying to criticize him and put him down and all that there, and make and put fear in people's heart for to build more jails and stuff like that. No, let's try to offer some services to this family that may have been broken, and it probably been broken for centuries. You know what I'm saying? It's a perpetual generational curse that's been going on. So let me get off, because I can go on a tangent. I'm sorry, y'all, but there are no resources. Let's get with our local and our elected officials abroad and let them know that this is a problem, and this is why we have it. You want Mr. What his name is, I'm sorry, Mr. Landry. You know what I'm saying? You want to get, some justice in New Orleans and try to get some of this crime down in New Orleans. How about investing in some of the families in New Orleans that's broken? You know what I'm saying? And that's how you go get the crime rate down and stuff like that.
I would like to just tap in and say a few things. Troy, your passion is just off the chain, for real, dope. But to answer her question, organizations that's fully funded, that's the issue. Organizations that's fully funded. It doesn't take an organization to help an individual. It takes the individual to help an individual. So I understand she may have a lot of, or he, whomever that person is, may have a lot of clients. My suggestion is reach out to people that you may know that have housing, that have rental properties, and ask them, hey, can you give my client a trial basis in housing, and we'll pay whatever fees or whatever. That's help. Because not only are you saying you're helping, but you're putting your money where you putting your mouth at. You're putting your money where you putting your words at. You're putting your money where you putting your comments and your thoughts at. And so instead of looking for businesses or organizations that's helping us, we need to help us. We need to help our own. We need to be the ones that help each other. Kiana said something about Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King didn't go to the legislators for help. He went to other churches. He went to other communities. He went to his own people. And that's what we need to start doing. Reaching out to our own people. There's Black people and brown people that own properties. Reach out to them and ask them, hey, can we get a rental on this property for 6 months or so? Let them see how this person work out, and then talk about a long-term solution. Like, there's other solutions besides us reaching out. I'm not saying don't reach out to our legislative. I agree with Troy 100%. We do need to do that because we elected these people to represent us. And right now, we're not getting any representation. We're not getting proper representation right now because formerly incarcerated people make up a large number in every community, not just in New Orleans or in Louisiana, in every community across the state. It's almost like we could be a class of our own, right? And that's something they're not going to talk about. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to, that's never going to come up in a conversation. That's never going to come up as a solution. So my thing is, get with people that's trying to help people. I know a bunch of, I know a few and far people that have, that's trying to get housing for people, but don't have the resources. The intent is good, but they don't have the resources. And so my suggestion to the person with that question is just basically The answer is there is no organizations that's fully funded. None, not one. Even First 72, with all that they do, is not fully funded. So there is no organization that's fully funded. There's only one woman place that I know of, and that's Operation Restoration that does housing for women, and they only take about 5 or 6 women. They're not fully funded. So there's no place that's fully funded that does housing for formerly incarcerated people. We need landlords, people that owns properties, to say, hey, let me rent to this person. Let me rent to this person. And that's what we need. And that's the conversation that needs to be brought up in every room, across every place in the state, in the city, is talking about how we're going to get housing for people, how we're going to get people to go to sleep at night. Because see, people that have jobs, they go to bed at night. They're not up all night long with the foolery. They're not up all night long. They got a job. Especially when you're making a salary that'll let you live comfortable. You're not up trying to do nothing but get you some rest so you could go to work the next morning to operate and function appropriately, right? So that's what we need. And so that question to that person is, find people that have properties, and that's who you have to get with your clients, because the government is not going to help us. They're not trying to help. The intent and their conversation sounds good, but their actions don't follow through with the conversation. And so that's what we need to just start building support systems amongst ourselves. And when you find out and you know someone that is renting, talk to them. Like right now, Airbnb is crashing in the city. Get with some of these Airbnb landlords and say, hey, would you mind renting to a formerly incarcerated person, and explaining the situation to them? I mean, it won't hurt but to try.
Well, I can't wrap things up any better than that. Y'all really did that. Thank you so much for this super real, super passionate conversation about the barriers that people are facing and what we realistically need to do. I think everybody in the audience can agree, we could have this conversation go on forever, but we do have to move on. But thank you all so much for being here. And we are so thankful for the continued partnership of y'all's organizations as we work across the state. So thank you so much. And I do have to put in a plug for Ffak's enforcement department. If you feel that you have been unfairly denied housing because of your criminal record, please give us a call. We can put the website and the intake line in the chat. Thank you all so much. And now I am happy to introduce Ffak's fabulous staff attorney, Jody Hill, who is going to present our client award for the day. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks to the panelists. I really enjoyed the conversation, and it is related to this award as well. As Sarah said, my name is Jody Hill, and I'm a staff attorney here at Ffak, and I'm excited to present the 2024 Fair Housing Hero Award to my former client, Ms. Terry Rivero. The award is important. It's a necessary recognition of the bravery that it takes to report a housing provider for violating the Fair Housing Act. As many of our panelists have rightfully highlighted throughout the day, the commodification of housing, the cost of housing, and the unjustified power that landlords can often hold places our tenants at constant risk of housing instability, harassment, and sometimes retaliation. And this is especially true for individuals who have experienced sexual harassment at the hands of their housing providers, oftentimes harassment that is never addressed. As I mentioned, this year's award goes to Ms. Terry Rivero. Ms. Rivero, I see you on camera. It's nice to see you. She contacted our office to report her landlords for sexual harassment and retaliation. And then she filed a complaint against them. She filed it in the midst of many institutions and people failing to take her experiences at her apartment seriously. Ms. Rivero, I witnessed your fortitude from the moment we first met, and I think about it often and I'll never forget it. What I admire most about Ms. Rivero is throughout our time together, she frequently mentioned that she reported her experience, yes, to hold her landlords accountable, but also because she did not want other people, and especially women in Louisiana, to go through this experience. This is how movements are built and sustained, and this is the fire that we'll always need in the Deep South. to continue the fair housing movement and also to continue to fight against sexual harassment in the state. Because of her bravery, her housing providers had to undergo a fair housing training on the Fair Housing Act and its protections, and had to adopt a fair housing policy that they had never had, that was approved by our office, and they had to pay damages. Ms. Rivera, it was an honor to represent you and to be a part of your fight to hold your landlords accountable. There are so many individuals in this state who unfortunately experienced what you experienced, and we just really appreciate your bravery and passion in stepping up for yourself and stepping up for others. And I will stop now and let you say a few words if you want. And thank you for joining, and it's good to see you again.
Thank you so much, Miss Jody Hill. I appreciate you taking my case and everything. I tried so many times on your shoulder and everything because I didn't think anybody believed me, but you was the only one that stepped up and believed me, and you took me by your hand and walked me through this whole process. And with that, I'm truly grateful and everything. And I think of you every day and appreciate everything you have done for me. With that, I truly am grateful for everything y'all have done for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Rivero, and thank you for everything that you've done for people who have had your experiences. And when you file a case and when people file cases in communities, it sets precedents and it makes it easier for the next person. So all thanks to you, and I'm sure we'll be in touch with your award. Thanks, Ms. Rivero, and hope you have a good day. With that, I will pass it to my colleague Mo to reintroduce the raffle and to lead us into break. Thank you, Ms. Rivero, and thank you to all.
Thank you. So we're finished.
That we're finished, yeah. So they're going to be in touch.
All right. Let's see who the winner of the first book will be, which is the first copy of Dr. Bullett's book, Wrong Complexion for Protection. All right, let's see who's the lucky winner. Elizabeth Bobo, and you will be getting that first book, and you will also receive a t-shirt. We will be reaching out to you to get your address and your t-shirt size so you can receive your prizes. All right, let's see who's going to be our second winner, and our second winner will receive a copy of Hood Feminism and a t-shirt as well. Let's see who the second winner will be. I might be saying this wrong, I'm so sorry. Jonathan Toops. You are the winner of the second book and the t-shirt. So we'll be reaching out to you at the end of this event to get your email and, well, to get your address and to get your t-shirt as well.
All right, so thank you to everybody who's been here for our first two panels and for our first raffle drawing. Next, we will be moving to another break until about 11:45. And then we'll be moving to our very exciting keynote speech from Dr. Robert Bullard. So what's important to know is that if you are joining us via Facebook, the live stream on Facebook is going to be paused during Dr. Bullard's speech. But if anybody's watching that live stream and wants to join us for Dr. Bullard's speech, it's not too late to register and join our webinar. You can just register at fitforaking.org/register. And I believe Malcolm will be putting that in the live stream chat, or I will momentarily. So with that said, we're going to move to our second break and then to our keynote speech. Thank you.
Hello, welcome back. Thank you for joining us after the break, and also thank you to our panelists for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation, especially after Dr. Bullard's keynote. I feel like it really framed up this conversation for us. Can you all give me excuse me for 1 second. Sorry about that brief interruption. Again, welcome to our panel. I'm very excited. This is our last panel for today, and the panel is entitled How Civil Rights Advocates Can Support People Power for Environmental Justice. And before I introduce our speakers, I'd just like to frame up the conversation a little bit for our audience. So last year, I think I spoke about this earlier, last year, after more than a decade of advocacy, a coalition of local organizations and residents in New Orleans were able to help get a healthy homes ordinance passed through the city council, which requires landlords to certify their properties are up to health and safety codes. But one of the things that we know and recognize is that these protections can only do so much when New Orleans rental housing stock was damaged pretty badly after Hurricane Ida, and no similar protections exist in the rest of the state. Also, that same storm has led to an ongoing crisis in the homeowners insurance industry. And beyond this, proximity to petrochemical plants and other heavy industry and racist decision-making in the placement of toxic sites and life-saving infrastructure has left a legacy of lasting harm to Louisianans and residents of other Gulf South states. So we're super excited to talk with our panelists today about how environmental racism and housing are intersecting issues. So I'll introduce our panelists now. Miriam Jordan serves as the climate justice attorney for Earth Rights International. She received her BA in anthropology and JD from Harvard University, and has developed international legal and advocacy strategies with indigenous organizations in Peru and Ecuador. She served as the counsel for the Special Litigation and Advocacy Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law until 2022, and currently leads Earth Rights International's US-focused climate justice and environmental justice litigation project. The project utilizes innovative legal strategies under US law and international human rights norms to support environmental justice movements in the United States. Recently, Earth Rights has filed a Title VI complaint against the Louisiana Office of Community Development for the displaced members of the Choctaw Nation from Ile de Jean Shaw. Joe Banner is the co-founder and co-director of the Descendants Project. She received both her BA and MA in communications in an effort to protect Louisiana's people and its environment. Banner's recent work focuses on environmental justice and actively develops strategies to create spaces where the Black descendants community in Louisiana's river parishes can thrive. Monique Hardin serves as both the Director of Law and Policy and the Community Engagement Program Manager for Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. She has 20 years of experience in practicing law by helping African American communities achieve environmental justice victories in the Gulf Coast region. Hardin has led local, regional, and international coalitions for communities advocating for human rights and healthy environments. She currently works to democratize policymaking on environmental matters and to reduce the impacts of pollution in Louisiana. So welcome to the three of you. And I'm just going to get started with a question for the whole panel. You can feel free to jump in however you see fit. But New Orleans and the Gulf South face a unique set of environmental issues given our proximity to both petrochemical industries and rising sea levels and other impacts really of climate change. Can any or all of you take us through some of the biggest issues that renters and our homeowners are facing in the communities that you work with, and some of the strategies that you're using to address them?
Well, sure, I'll go first. Again, my name is Monique Hardin. I'm with the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, and it's just an honor and a pleasure to be a part of this event with allies and partners here in New Orleans at the Fair Housing Action Center. So the biggest gap we have when we're looking at the issues of environmental racism is that there are no legal protections against it. Outside of civil rights and human rights standards and requirements. And I think understanding that is important in terms of figuring out strategies to overcome or to close the gap between environmental justice on one hand and the array of laws and policies that are the purpose for which are environmental protection on the other side. And so in this chasm that exists between justice and these legal frameworks, civil rights and human rights can really bridge that gap. So for example, a lot of people think that, you know, federal laws that have been around since 1970, like the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, mean what they say, and they don't. Instead, these are, you know, very complex, lots of text, technical requirements that really boil down in their essence to codifying the status quo of industrial operations. So Cancer Alley is born from the history of slave plantations that were later converted to industrial plants. And so the oppression, the racism, the brutal treatment of people based on the color of our skin is endemic to an economic engine for the state of Louisiana. And so all of those facilities, notwithstanding the injustice that's just, any human being would see this and see that this cries out for justice. They're all legal. They're all permitted under the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, because those laws do not address proximity to homes, negative, severe, significant adverse health outcomes, or other ways in which, just general quality of life can be severely impaired when you're next to or in the shadows of a toxic industrial facility. Along with that industrial pollution, the other piece of it, which gets to the healthy homes piece, is that you all you led the work in the city of New Orleans of creating a law to deal with this gap between the rights that people should have just because they're human beings when they rent a home, to make sure that it's not going to kill or harm them, right? And so in this gap is, I think, where it's an invitation for social justice advocates and certainly civil rights attorneys to really get involved and thinking about ways in which they can bridge that justice to the law.
I wanted to jump in and just build off of some of Monique's really excellent points. And just to provide more context, I think of the vulnerability of Louisiana when we're thinking about the intersection of climate change and environmental racism. The fact that the southern coast of Louisiana has extreme rapid land loss, and I think it's among the highest rate in the entire country, in addition to having communities that unfortunately face some of the highest cancer risk in the nation because of toxic exposure. And this is unfortunately part of the status quo. And as Monique said, this is all legal. And I think, not only do we have to think about the framework of the law and how it's, interacts with structural racism and favoring corporate interests versus the interest of communities. I think homeowners and renters face additional challenges when we think about, okay, we know that this is happening. Now what? For example, I've, met community members whose homes have very little value because of proximity to an industrial plant. And, if someone wants to relocate, it is going to be a huge challenge because they are not going to be able to sell that home. And, I think, I'm hoping one day in the future we'll have better policies and reparations frameworks for toxic exposure. But, someone's option is pretty limited. And I think it's going to be the same with the renter. And, when we're thinking about property rights, unfortunately, it's going to go more to the homeowner versus the person who is living there. And, not only do you have those types of challenges, but with disaster relief, we were talking about Hurricane Ida and how, there are a lot of homes that are still destroyed that have not been rebuilt. Getting access to FEMA funding in itself poses challenges. We provide support to some tribes in coastal Louisiana that are not federally recognized. And this means that they're really limited in the type of federal resources they can get. And I think FEMA is a great example where non-recognized tribes just do not have access to the same extent of resources, and tribal members have to apply for FEMA support individually, which unfortunately is not often enough to, fully repair one's home and restore a community. And so, I think there's so many different layers to this problem. I know that this question is also important part forward thinking when we're discussing strategies. I think there's a wide range of strategies to consider given the complexity of the issue, whether it's through traditional civil rights tools such as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, or building off of the administrative role of agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency, which under the Clean Air Act, there is a provision where the agency does have a broad authority to act when it comes to issues threatening public health and that leading to an environmental crisis. I think there's also tools to hold the polluters accountable directly, albeit there are definitely challenges there. We are seeing increasing cases where polluters are being taken to court for the harms that have been caused by their operations, such as someone developing cancer or another type of illness that can be attributed to that exposure. So, I'll leave it on that note on, I think when we're thinking about these issues, we should be creative and think about the many different facets of the problem and the laws that can play into that.
Thank you. Joe, did you want to jump in?
Sure, and thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be on a panel with two attorneys because I have so much respect for the work that our attorneys have been doing, especially attorneys that work in civil rights. I found that I had really no idea of what modern civil rights look like, to be honest. And working with people such as our attorneys gave us the language to express that and to see civil rights violations in the modern time, what that looks like. Because if I was a person who thought about civil rights in the black and white videos that I would see of the dogs and the water being put on people, but not understanding really fully that what we're going through right now in terms of environmental injustice is also a civil rights violation. So I appreciate having that language now and having that lens of saying, yeah, this is something when there's zoning issues or real estate issues, all those different ways that we are harassed, that it is civil rights. For me in St. John the Baptist Parish, which was recently named the #1 most climate vulnerable county out of 70,000 measured in the country. And that's through the Climate Vulnerability Index. many people in this parish have flooded several times on the east bank of the Mississippi River. I know some people 3 times, as much as 3 times, as much as 4 times. So right there, we have that issue, but the flooding issue is addressed by, we're going to put a levee. And then that happens to flood more people. Yes, it does offer some solace, but then other people are also flooded by the placement of a levee. We never address, though, I never hear the parish government, the state government address the fact that you have industry all around us producing greenhouse gases that are contributing immensely to the climate issues that we're having, to the drought situations that we're having. So we're having flood on one side and we're having drought on the other. But you never hear that actually identified as a big problem of a big reason to have the problems that we do. And worst of all, for those of us who do stay dry on the West Bank of St. John the Baptist Parish for the most part, now our land is being utilized potentially to take the clay to make the levee on the East Bank. And it's coming in the Black part of our community. So you see the violations continue because of all the land that they're looking for to come over to the areas where the Black people are and trying to get the clay in order to make that levee. So we're just always constantly in this loop of dealing with these different issues. And I think we talk about like land ownership and the importance of having Black land ownership, but also land retention is important, Black land retention, because that land has continual targets on its back. My family has owned land for generations. For generations, we are not new to land ownership, but at least 3 times our land has been taken from us, our land has been violated, or our rights to the land has been challenged, like what we're facing right now with the potential addition of more heavy industry on the West Bank of St. John the Baptist Parish.
Joe, one thing I want to follow up with you about is we heard from Monique and Miriam about some of the ways that lawyers and legal workers are sort of trying to be creative about the gaps in the law and legal frameworks that maybe hadn't been used before to get relief or to get accountability. But there's also a lot of power in the way that people organize and the way that they activate around these issues in their communities. And I just would love to hear from you about some of the ways that you're also being creative in addressing those very problems that you just raised for us.
Well, for me, for us, what we observe what's happening, being observant, and then also communicating that to our partners, our advocates, and our attorneys. We leave no stone unturned, whether it's from potential for or the presence of the burial grounds for the enslaved, recognizing that we are on the grounds of former plantations, as Monique mentioned before, and seeing what connection, what legal power could be in that, in addition to just the fact that it's a sacred site for us, to mention in the wildlife that we see. All of those things that maybe don't stand out to us as much, if we're mindful and observe, there's a lot communicating to us all the time in different ways and different avenues that we could use as strategies in this legal battle. But also taking this from the fight from just a legal one to an emotional one, focusing on the human rights and really saying, how would you like to visit your loved ones who've passed on in the middle of a plant? What would that mean to you? Is that the way you respect your loved ones? So taking it from this very technical, getting permits, which is also important, to making it to a very emotional and personal conversation has been important for us. And fleshing that story out, standing on the shoulders of our ancestors and speaking for them, having them be we be their vessels, in addition to representing the future of their descendants. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but really, I've just, on a historic preservation side, we have the site, these plantation homes in my area that have been protected because, they're gone with the wind plantation homes, but then also, in another lens, is a way to protect our communities and also begin to tell the story of those enslaved to the plantation and inputting and intervening as much as we can to make sure that those voices are always heard from ancestors and descendants.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was really helpful and also just really powerful to think about the different ways that you're invoking your ancestors and other tools to sort of push back on all of the issues that you're facing in your community. I want to turn to Miriam briefly just to talk about, because I heard you talking about like, oh, I'm using these kinds of frameworks, I'm using these kinds of laws to address issues that my clients face. And one of the things that came up was whether or not you think lawsuits under the Fair Housing Act would be an option when looking at the impact of pollution on communities of color. And I would even expand it beyond pollution and talk about the impacts of climate change on already vulnerable communities.
Definitely. So to address your question, I just wanted to take a step back when we're talking about discrimination cases in the context of environmental justice and climate change. A big challenge is showing, that an act is discriminatory under the law. And, for certain types of claims, such as the Equal Protection Act, you need to show that discriminatory intent, which is really difficult to show. In the case for certain statutes, such as the Fair Housing Act, you can show a disparate impact instead, or that, some sort of action or policy has a discriminatory effect on a protected population. And when you're thinking about a legal claim, showing a disparate impact is a lot easier. At least for me, that makes my job a lot easier. So I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities to utilize the Fair Housing Act, given that standard for discrimination. And I really think there's so many different ways to use that statute. For example, when we're thinking about local land use laws and zoning that pave the path for heavy industrial activity to come in and create more pollution that is probably going to disproportionately affect Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. The Fair Housing Act could be an interesting tool if you can show that this zoning, has led to this discriminatory effect. I think that, this could be some creative thinking. And I do think that given the expansiveness of the Fair Housing Act, you could intersect various types of rights at play. So not just, discrimination on the basis of race, but, perhaps disability. I think there's a lot of ways to be creative. I do see the Fair Housing Act having more of a role when we're thinking about water pollution. The statute has been applied when it comes to the provision of municipal water services. And this could be key for communities of color that are experiencing groundwater pollution, especially those that rely on well water and do not have access to municipal water services. I know it really depends on the context. So, I don't want to say it's always the case that the municipal water is going to be safer, but that's another situation where the Fair Housing Act could be an interesting tool when we're thinking about the types of services that come along with housing. I think some other ways to think about using the Fair Housing Act could apply to, other types of air pollution that's not just connected to heavy industrial activity. There's been a lot more reports on the harmful impacts of methane, which is seen as being a significant source of climate change. And it's not just, coming from, oil and gas drilling, but it is also connected to gas stoves. While there's more and more studies about this and how when you operate a gas stove, this raises a lot of questions for indoor air quality and what this means for health impacts. I think it could be really interesting to think about the Fair Housing Act in that context and what this could mean for obligations for safe housing. I also think that the Fair Housing Act could be an interesting tool when we're thinking about remedies for communities that are dealing with environmental racism or climate forced displacement. For example, there are circumstances where communities have decided that relocation is best for them. We've heard about circumstances where companies have orchestrated quote unquote voluntary buyouts with communities, and the effects of those buyouts were actually not equitable, where Black homeowners are receiving a lot less money than white homeowners. The Fair Housing Act has its place when it comes to the appraisal of homes, and there could be, I think, a creative way to use that to ensure that future community relocation initiatives are not discriminatory. So, I think this is just a wide range of ideas in which I think the Fair Housing Act could be used to address pollution or the impacts of climate change. But I think given, what I think is great, like the broad utility of the statute, I think there's just so many different ways to think about it, whether it's, targeting the legal structure that allows the pollution to, the actual impacts of the pollution, or, solutions that are community oriented.
Thank you, Miriam. That was really helpful. And very interesting. Monique, I'm gonna turn to you. This is something that I think comes from your bio, and also feel free to jump in on the fair housing question into if you are like itching to add something to that. But how do voting rights and voting access intertwine with environmental racism? So how do we center the voices of people affected by environmental catastrophe in determining outcomes in their communities? You're on mute, Monique.
Oh, sorry. How long have we been using Zoom? Unmute. One of the cornerstones of the work we do at the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice really focuses in on education and research and engagement. And this is really connected with the story that Dr. Joe Banner shared with us about, just looking in on, ancestors who are, have been buried, and that ground not being respected as sacred, but being, viewed as sites for further industrial development, and ownership of land being taken away. All of those, each of those stories are stories that can be compiled into a story that also has data behind it, like how many were buried here, what's the acre, what's the location. When you begin mapping and documenting your stories, and that documentation can be by video, paper, or whatever, but that's a way in which you can organize and bring community members together about things that they care the most about, that they are concerned about losing, that they are aggrieved about seeing disrespected or some other form of mistreatment. But being able to root those stories in the community perspective, and then being able to generate data that backs it up, reinforces it, and helps us to picture people maybe outside of the community, to picture and see what's going on, and being able to map. And what has happened since the Descendants Project with Joe Banner's leadership has done, more and more communities in Louisiana are looking at burial sites, right, as a way to honor their ancestors, as well as to secure their future in their communities, and around sustainability and health. And so in terms of so that kind of work can lead to not just being able to identify and locate and map and quantify the problem. It can also bring folks around the next question, which is, what are our solutions? And so now you've got folks together thinking about solutions, and those solutions are often going to go in the form of, we need a right that protects us. We need a policy that safeguards against this. Now you're off to the races towards voting rights, and the activation around more people being interested in who's getting into an office that can decide these issues, that can make the situation better or worse. And so that education and research piece often kind of gets shortchanged when we talk about advocacy and voting rights, but it's essential to being able to bring people together, direct the goals that people set out for themselves around community-driven solutions and the work to get to it. So that voting becomes a way in which they can secure rights that are important to them. And those rights really need to be shown with community led research and data generation. I'll just give a quick example of that because
please go ahead.
There's a community that Deep South Center for Environmental Justice partners with in Pensacola, Florida. There are 3 contiguous historic African American communities of Wedgwood, Olive Heights, and Rolling Hills there in Pensacola, which is in Escambia County, Florida, on the Florida Panhandle near the state of Alabama. And that is the location where county governing officials have permitted borrow pits, or where the huge acres of land are scooped out, and then they also permit construction and debris waste permits. So what gets scooped out, the soil and that gets scooped out for building construction elsewhere outside of the community, then becomes home to a landfill, a dump site. And so one of the impacts, there are many impacts from this, but one of them is that it intensifies and increases flooding in the surrounding homes. So you can have a moderate rainfall and they will see, water, over their ankles. And being able to get into the science of how water moves in their community, being able to map where the areas are that are most vulnerable, being able to show where that water flows and how that water becomes toxic because of the waste industries that it's passing through on its way downward. And so being able to use mapping, generating maps, generating that data, they were able to present to their Escambia County Board of Commissioners on a day when these industries were looking to get their permits renewed. This major blind spot in the way of this kind of decision making on the permit, that this is flood impacts, the harm it does for communities exposed to toxic flooding, it need to be on the radar and need to be considered and need to be accounted for by the Escambia Board of County Commissioners. And you know what they did? They decided not to renew the permits. They also decided to look into the existing regulations that they have for this permitting decisions to figure out how they can account for and address these serious impacts, and to do it with the community that had organized. It's called Unity in the Family Ministry, is the name of the community-based organization that we partnered with and provided educational workshops so they could be able to generate and produce this kind of data and use it for the ways in which I can protect their community in the long haul. And so it's really brought about this sea change. So I want to use that just to underscore what Dr. Jo Banner was laying out in terms of discovering and documenting and mapping things that are important to the community and using that to drive change.
That's so helpful. And I think this theme that sort of keeps coming up since the beginning of this panel was like the sort of insufficiency of the legal frameworks that we have, right? So in June of 2023, the EPA abruptly closed 2 administrative complaints and dropped negotiations on a plan to reform the permit process for industrial facilities in Louisiana. I think the then Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry claimed that the federal government was overstepping its authority to enforce Title VI. I know we've talked about this, but there are many limitations to administrative and legal processes that really, I think, hamper folks' ability to address when wrongs are done, right? So industrial pollution, man-made disasters, environmental ills, generally speaking. And what we know, thanks to you all and thanks to Dr. Bullard, is like Black people, brown people, Indigenous people end up in these places experiencing these types of things the most, right? So just to highlight, I think, without being redundant, just like the shortcomings of, specifically some of the shortcomings of our existing laws, and any way forward that you can see. And this is for any of the panelists.
I can answer as a non-legal, and one of the people on that lawsuit, litigation, and one's, I guess, dropped by the EPA. But what I have learned through my participation in the Plastics Treaty in the United Nations space, and being able to speak to many different attorneys and scientists and researchers, that despite the fact that the rules and these laws need to be strengthened and tightened, but the United States actually has a lot more power that is just not utilizing. There's a lot of laws and measurements in place where, instead of like taking it to the max to protect communities, the EPA and other agencies are still tiptoeing around that. So I've been in many meetings where we are begging these government agencies to use the power that you already have, use it to the max. Stop pretending like you don't have the power. That has been honestly my frustration, is going into these buildings and these powerful department heads, and me being there telling them, hey, yes, you can do it. You can, you go. I'm like the cheerleader trying to get them to respond. So that's been my frustration, in addition to yes, the laws need to be made better, but I feel like these departments are relying on the fact that the laws aren't the best to deny the fact that they do have a lot more power than what we've seen them exhibit through protecting communities like mine from environmental injustice.
Yeah, I think Dr. Banner's points, also really speak to, I think, the political nature of this, which is very unfortunate, and I think, plays a role to the degree that agencies are willing to jump in. We don't have any federal enforceable statutes specifically on environmental racism or uplifting environmental justice. I mean, sure, under the Biden administration, there have been a series of executive orders that, are on paper are aimed to improve commitment to environmental justice, but, those themselves are not enforceable. And so I think that there is a lot more agencies could do, but there is, I think, as Dr. Banner said, a lot of tiptoeing, which I think is a really challenging limitation. I mean, going back to, where there are opportunities legally, I mean, I know I already went on about the Fair Housing Act, but I really do think that it could be a great option for environmental justice advocates, especially since a lot of the civil rights tools just have that higher requirement for showing discrimination when it plays a role, when a lawsuit wants to highlight that. And I also think that there's a lot of opportunities for strengthening laws, through ordinances or through the state. I think, going back to what Monique said on, the intersection of voting rights, I do think that there's a lot of opportunities to push for positive change. What we're seeing in New Orleans with this, great ordinance on healthy homes. I think that we're going to see more of that in the future, especially given that environmental justice is getting more and more attention, which is great. And, I think we're also really starting to reckon more with the impacts of climate change. So I think that there's going to be a lot of positive developments in local and state laws that I think are going to pave the way for more lawsuits. And I think we should also be thinking about state constitutions. Louisiana Constitution has right to a healthy environment, which we do not have under the U.S. Constitution. But I think there are ways to kind of be thinking more along those lines, instead of just trying to solely rely on federal statutes.
Thank you, Miriam. Monique, I didn't want to leave you out if you wanted to jump in on this question, but also no pressure, because
there's a lot I want to say, and I don't know how much. I know we're kind of running up against the clock, but let me just say that the water is warm and everybody should be jumping in and diving in on this, because with the Biden-Harris administration, one of the things that they've opened up is the opportunity to not just learn about civics theoretically or academically, but to immerse yourself in it, because doing so can bring investments in communities that that these policies are now valuing in terms of community-led projects that can invest in improvements and benefits. This is the Justice 40 initiative as a federal policy aimed at various new pots of money that I think have now opened eyes to old and existing pots of money that have never found their way into our communities, like monies for hazard mitigation, monies for improving water systems, as just two examples. But now we've got the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, among two that have this connection with the idea that 40% of the benefit should go to disadvantaged communities under the Biden-Harris Justice 40 initiative, this federal policy. That I think that's extremely important, because in addition to the what we see on the front end is this permitting system, or bad, unsustainable, sick housing, are all kind of part and parcel of a system of decision making that really cuts our communities out of real meaningful investments for the present and into the long term. And so one of the way in which Title VI of the Civil Rights Act works is that, as I tell family and friends and especially like young children, is that not one red penny of federal money is to be used in a way that discriminates on the basis of race, color, or national origin. And so just think about the billions of dollars that flow out each year with the congressional budget that finds its way to states and cities and local governments that are missing our communities. And so this is an opportunity in terms of what's right, what we can be for, is another piece to this work around civil rights, human rights, social justice, racial justice as we go forward. And I just don't want to leave that out.
Thank you for adding that, Monique. I have one last question for you all. This is our last question. I hope you will all answer, but the theme for this year's summit, as you know, is as goes the South, so goes the nation, what the South can teach the fair housing movement. And to wrap our panel, I'd love to hear from each of you what the nation can learn from the experiences that people you serve or work with in your fight for environmental justice in the South.
I'll just say community solutions work, and we should be investing in it and supporting it.
I was going to say the same thing. I think the brilliant work of Dr. Banner just really shows that there's so much to learn and take direction from communities. They know the solutions. They have great ideas of how the law can be a means to an end when it comes to fighting back on the oppression that the many different oppressors that are at play when it comes to environmental racism. So yeah, I just want to echo that. It's really based on the community.
Yeah, for me, I have to say there's no such thing as a small community. That what happens in our communities is an international human rights crisis when it comes down to the pollution that we face. And so I encourage community members who may find themselves in the challenges that they have to utilize any stage that they can. Don't limit yourself. Fight locally, but if that fight brings you to Geneva or wherever, or Africa, intervening, be there, because if you are not there, industry is there speaking for you. They're ready. They are around the world pretending like they are your community. So I think it's really important for us to show up in all those conversations. And if you have the means or resources to get to those stages or get to those tables, then please be there.
Thank you so much. I love that answer. I was hoping that all of you would talk about community based solutions, because as much as we, those of us who work in the legal sector, those of us who use the law in our profession and in our lives to fight back against injustice, I think really the power comes from movements and advocates who are in community, really doing the work to get their people organized and to gain power to create and call for new solutions. So I love those answers, and I really just want to thank all three of you for a very powerful panel. I wish we had a little bit more time to have this conversation because I think it is a very important conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your brilliance and all of your thoughts to us today. I also just want to thank Dr. Bullard and all the other panelists and attendees who are here with us right now and who have been here with us throughout the day. Please remember, if you are in the audience, to fill out your evaluation and survey online. You'll receive an email, a wrap-up email from us, which will ask you to give us your opinion on this year's summit. So please do that so we can continue to make this event one that you like to attend. And we ask that you consider becoming a recurring donor to Ffak in any amount to sustain our work and to allow us to quickly respond in this unpredictable time. If you missed any of today's summit, we'll be sharing the recordings at fitforaking.org. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Dr. Joe. Thank you, Monique. Thank you to our interpreters, to the Ffak staff who has been coordinating all of this and running this Zoom today so seamlessly. So I hope you all have a great weekend and a great evening. And we're signing off.